I'm here in Sheffield. Sheffield has a strong union history and a strong history of the left, and it's delightful to be here, ready to spread and amplify our green message. On May the 7th, there's a really important set of elections. It's really important that people know that green is not just an option, but is the option. We know people are increasingly rejecting the old party politics of the Labour Party and the Conservative Party, but we know that the right are on the move. It's really important we reject hate and division, and actually what the Green Party are offering is a politics of community, solidarity and tangible change. Far too many people are worried about their rent, worried about paying their energy bill or their water bill. Feels like we're running all the time just to stay on the spot. And actually getting Greens elected on the local council are people who will stand up for our community spaces, our libraries, to make sure that community investment is coming to the high street, that we're keeping people together, that we're making sure we're talking about community, and ultimately that is what a Green vote is. So do vote Green on May the 7th.
Without further ado, can I give a big round of applause for Zack Polanski?
Well, this room isn't too shoddy. It's pretty lovely. And thank you for that lovely, lovely welcome to Sheffield. And thank you to Kim. Kim, you're the first person I've seen to hype up a crowd to then do housekeeping. It was beautiful housekeeping notes, and thank you very, very much. I've had a really lovely and busy and productive day. I feel, you know, when not that I'm claiming I'm a pop star, I'm certainly not going to sing, but when pop stars go from venue to venue, I've done that today because I've been to Wakefield, then to Barnsley, then to here, and you have that moment where you worry you're going to run onto stage and go, "Good evening, Hull," or whatever, but I know I'm in Sheffield. It's all good. And I know I'm in Sheffield because I was just with some of you at the bus station, and then I got the free bus. No. You're a Green Party audience. I got the free bus. The free bus delivered by Green councillors, the power of getting Greens elected. And for those who don't know, if you've not seen the news today, I was at the bus station because I was announcing our policy of making sure that under 22s get a free bus pass. Now, I saw, yeah, indeed. Now, rest assured, this won't be our only public transport policy of all time. This is just the first step. And the reason why it's so important is because we have a choice to make. We can either fund billionaires and their tax breaks, or we can recognize that for so many people, bus travel is actually a lifeline for jobs, for training, to get to skills workshops, and arguably, most importantly, see your mates, see loved ones. It's really important that we are investing in our communities. And if people want accountancy, we can listen to the accountants. KPMG say that for every pound that you spend on bus travel, you get between £4.55 and £5 back into your community. Because bus commuters spend £37 billion annually in their communities. You've got to be careful with those numbers, otherwise it sounds like I'm saying that one bus commuter spends £37 billion. That's a busy day in Sheffield. But ultimately, all of this is what's known as a spending multiplier. So you're investing in part of your community services and you're getting that money right back. It seems like common sense, but common sense is often lacking in our politics these days. In fact, at the bus station, the BBC came along to interview me. This has just happened. They asked me lots of questions about buses, and then they said, "Could we ask you about some other things?" Sure. And then there was a question about Greenland and Donald Trump. And I started my answer by talking about the unhinged president. And I saw the journalist looked like, "Oh my God, what are you saying?" I thought, surely it's common sense at this moment that Donald Trump cannot be trusted. And so I think it's just important that we tell things how they are. I was actually about to talk about local politics, but while we're talking about how things, talking about things like they are, talking about Donald Trump, we've also seen today, I don't know if you've seen the news, that on the new peace board is Tony Blair. Yeah, we're a few months away from panto season, but that's probably the correct correct response. Joking aside, though, this is like putting the arsonist in charge of putting out the fire. Or I was trying to think of other metaphors. It's a bit like Nigel Farage, the man who was principally the reason and cause of Brexit, one of the most catastrophic decisions for our country, both economically and socially, returning to the front line of politics and suddenly claiming to be something new with all of these new politicians who are literally former Tories, who were slating reform just a few months ago. They're now in reform, saying that they are not the establishment. Nigel Farage claims he is a man of the people, but he is literally a man of the wealthy people. He doesn't want to represent the 99%. Nigel Farage is there to serve Donald Trump and his rich billionaire and multimillionaire mates. And here in Sheffield, we are here to present the alternative. And finally, on international affairs, I couldn't speak at a public meeting without asking us to send our solidarity to everyone in Iran at the moment, particularly the women who are on the streets protesting. There has been an outrageous digital boycott, and it is really, really important that all of us around the world say to those protesters, we have solidarity with the protesters in Iran. Now, it seems that Keir Starmer is able to say that because he's an international lawyer, didn't you know, who cares about human rights. But when you look at his actions in terms of other places in the world, it really looks like he was either lying about what he believed back then or lying what he believes now, and I'm not sure which is worse. So also, in terms of solidarity, let's send solidarity to those who have ended the hunger strike, those who remain on hunger strike, and most of all, let's send our solidarity to the Palestinians. It is time to end the genocide. Now, in 110 days' time, not that I'm counting every single day, there are a pretty important set of local elections. And in Sheffield, you have a huge set of elections on May the 7th, and the stakes are high. I want to talk about the local in a moment, but you can't distance this from the national. In fact, I want to talk about hope in a moment, but first of all, let's start with Margaret Thatcher. Quite. Now, it was Margaret Thatcher and Reagan, to be fair, and neoliberalism. Thatcher said, there's no such thing as society. And then both her and decades of conservative governments sought to shut down our community centres, our libraries, destroy our green spaces, stop building council housing. It was not a phrase when they said there's no such thing as society. They wanted and have been actually acting it out by working to destroy our communities. Now, I say working to destroy because what this room tells me tonight is you can never destroy community. No matter what they try to do, no matter how much they slash, there will always be resilience of people to come together. But I'm not complacent about this, not just about the hundreds of people in this room, but we know we're all concerned about the people who are not in this room. The people who might not come to a political meeting, and we know we need to be here for them too. To make sure we're reaching out to always look at how politics can be more inclusive, more accessible. We can make sure that in decisions are made at grassroots level, people are actually at the table, particularly the people who are least heard of. But this is the opposite to everything that the Conservative project has tried to do. They have tried to break people down. They have tried to crush people's spirits. But of course, it was not just the Conservative government, because then riding in on his horse like a knight in shining armour was Sir Keir Starmer. He deserved the biggest boo of the night, by the way. But anyway, I don't know if you've noticed, not much has changed. In fact, things have arguably got worse. We still have the exact same austerity, the same cruel performative politics, particularly to migrants and refugees, but now they are done with a sad face, with a shrug. They talk about the plight of the Palestinians, but they just say that they're really sorry about it. They talk about the fact that we have a climate crisis and a nature crisis. Well, they don't really talk about the nature crisis. They just instead wage war on the bats and the newts. And they talk about how sorry they are that they have to cut things and make difficult decisions. But why are they always difficult decisions for our working class communities, for unemployed people, for disabled people, for trans people? When are we going to see difficult decisions for multimillionaires and billionaires? It is time to tax the rich. Now, if there was a right-wing journalist in here, is there? Anyway, they'd be welcome, I suppose. They would go, isn't this easy answers? Isn't this all so simple? Might they just leave? Where's this money going to come from? And we need to tackle this head on. The 50 richest families in the UK own more wealth than the bottom 50% of the population. That's 34 million people. That was a lot of figures, so I'll go one more time. 50 families own more wealth than 34 million people. That's before we even consider the international stage and the huge disparity between the West and the global South. So there is plenty of money and plenty of wealth in our country. Meanwhile, so many people feel like they're just running on the spot the entire time. Rent has gone up. Water bills have gone up. They dread opening their next energy bill. Now, there's a difference between simple and easy, because I happen to think the solutions are pretty simple. They're just not easy. And they're not easy because they're not simple. They're not easy because a Conservative government and now a Labour government and a billionaire-owned media have spent incredible amounts of money to try and remove people's imaginations, to tell us that we don't deserve better, that things can't be different, that they're sorry that things are the way they are, but that's just the way it is. And so the number one thing we must do, both at the national level and at these local elections, is to inspire that imagination in people. To have creative storytelling, art, music, conversations going from door to open people's imagination. Sometimes we won't win the argument in the first conversation, but just giving the idea, having that conversation that things do not have to be this way, that there is mass inequality, that the poor have got poorer and the rich have got richer, is the beginning of that conversation. Now, we know there will be other obstacles. I'm speaking in Sheffield, a city that has a proud history of trade unions, a proud history of left-wing movements, and I am very proud of Sheffield as a city of sanctuary. Now, the city of sanctuary feels particularly pertinent to me because many of you will know, just a month or two ago, I spent a few days in Calais. Now, when I went to Calais, I wasn't expecting it to be anything but brutal, harsh, and dystopian. But without using hyperbole, nothing prepared me for how shameful the situation is. And to make it worse, it's not just that this awful thing is going on in France and in Calais. I've never been to a war zone, and I'm not going to pretend I have. But the context, the situation people are living in, the trauma you feel behind people's eyes when you speak to them, will stay with me forever. And to know that our government are not just complicit, our government are actively paying £367 million for a 3-year deal on the militarization and securitization of Calais. What does this look like? This looks like the fact that when people have set up tents or water tanks to be able to get fresh water, the police come in every 24 to 48 hours, slash the tents, pierce the water tanks so people can't get water, The water, by the way, there are perfectly functioning pipes that are running under these campsites. If anyone had any humanity in them, they could install a tap and people could at least have clean water while they're living on those sites. But because of nothing but cruelty, the taps have been destroyed and the police destroy the tanks so people can't even drink water. Now, I posted a fundraiser, and I'm delighted, but I'm not looking for applause here, genuinely, that the fundraiser raised £115,000 in just a few weeks. That's amazing, and shows the generosity of British people who want to see things better. But I also know deep down in my heart that that money will go on tents, on the water tanks, on making the situation livable for the moment, and that's really important, so I'm not knocking the work we've done to raise that money. But I also know it's not a solution, because we are just stuck in this cycle of violence and treatment towards refugees and people who are fleeing their life, and it absolutely doesn't have to be that way. Now, someone might argue, well, why don't they just go to France? France is a safe country. Well, this is the other bit they need to know. To get to an asylum center or a processing center in France from Calais, you need to go to Lille. It's between an hour and 2 hours away. It costs between 30 to 40 euros return. If you have fled a war zone, you're unlikely to have that money easily. On top of that, there are police people who stop, particularly people of color, at the station, take off their phones, if they're still lucky to have a phone, take away their passport, if they've still managed to keep their passport, and remove their belongings. So not only do you need to get to Lille once with that money, you may need to go 3 or 4 times with your application. And the moment you miss an appointment, the whole thing resets, and you've missed your chance to claim asylum. The phrase I heard over and over again in Calais is, we are not allowed to stay and we are not allowed to leave. So when people get on a small boat or a dinghy, it's very obvious, but this is not their first option. This is the worst and last resort. And on top of this, maybe the worst abuse of all, that because of the rhetoric of Nigel Farage and Tommy Robinson, and let's be clear, Keir Starmer too, who has appeased them, which has pushed them further to the right, there are now right-wing activist groups who turn up in Calais to do nothing but to abuse and shout at the people who are already having the worst situations. Now, because this is getting very grim and dark, I do want to share some other reflections. One, this is quite niche, but I've broken through to Sudanese TikTok. So the amount of Sudanese people who were very excited to see me there both surprised me and was a very lovely moment. And to be able to talk to people, even in their darkest moments, who are still keeping up hope, who are still delighted and who are still hopeful to see that there are people in Britain at meetings like this who are saying it loud and are saying it clear. Refugees are welcome here. And the other thing that gives me more hope than anything is the fact that I know that the British public are not cruel. We're not inhumane. And despite the fact that so much of the media daily tells us we're just out for self-interest, or it's just us, number one, that's not the experience I have, and I'm sure you have either, when I knock on doors or go to community centres. Sure, I won't be disingenuous. I meet people who are worried, who are concerned about their local high street, about their community, about the direction the country is going. I also sometimes meet people who are concerned about the safety of their children. But we know that the problems here are not coming over by small boat. The problems here are a government that have refused to invest in community services, have refused to invest in our high streets, have refused to invest in education or English lessons, or to make sure that we're bringing people together. So we come back to the idea that no, this is not easy, but it is simple. And the simple first steps that you need to do is make sure that you're funding our communities properly, that you're tackling inequality. And no, it's not easy, but it's only not easy because the forces of the multimillionaires and billionaires are making it difficult. But that's where we come in, friends. A couple of things. First of all, I've talked about the cost of living crisis. And if that's really hitting you right now, the next thing I'm about to say doesn't apply to you, and I'm just really glad you're here. If you're someone who's not facing desperate times right now, the Green Party will never take dirty money from multimillionaires and billionaires. I'm stood here at this microphone, and I can say, without a shadow of a doubt, I have never accepted a penny from private healthcare, from oil and gas companies, from arms trade companies, from gambling companies. There are not many frontline politicians who can say that. And that is absolutely outrageous. How far has the bar become so low that it's unusual to say that I and other Green Party politicians are funded by our members? But actually, to be funded by our members, 90% of our donations come from regular donations. So as I say, I'm really grateful that you're here. And elections cost money. So if you're able to, after this evening, please do consider donating to the Green Party, because we are being so outspent by the Reform Party, by the Labour Party, and the Conservative Party. But what they don't have, which we do have, is people power. So if you're not able to donate, the other thing I really encourage you to do between now and May the 7th is get out on the doorsteps, leafleting and door knocking. I should say, I know so many of you have, not just recently, but for years. So first of all, thank you very much for doing what you've been doing. But also, if you've not done it before, I've realized one of the biggest barriers people say to me is they're a little bit worried about door knocking. So I would say the main thing to be worried about with door knocking is the state of undress that people open the doors with. It's pretty terrifying. Sometimes it's just a bit like, did you not think to put a dressing gown on? But quite seriously, I can say the amount of times that people have been rude is pretty minute. And that's, I think, for two reasons. One, with the Green Party, and I think, so Nigel Farage last week called me a lunatic. At other times, I'm useless and can't get anything done, or the Green Party can't get anything done. Other times, we're a national security threat. I think they're a bit confused. Like, are we this dangerous threat, or aren't we worth worrying about? They seem confused about it. But the vast majority of people know, even if they don't agree with us, that the Green Party only have two vested interests: to protect people and to protect the planet. And when those are your vested interests, there's very little to attack you for. The other thing, though, is when you door knock, you're not going to lecture people on policy or going to give a speech. You're going to ask people their opinions. What do you think about your local area? How are you thinking about voting? Is there anything you would want Sheffield Green Party to know that you think we should be campaigning on? And honestly, the experience we have more than anything is people often say, oh, I don't have any time, or I've only got 30 seconds. You ask them their opinion on something, and 10 minutes later, you're trying to get away from them. And that's great, because people want to have conversations, and far too often, people are never asked for their opinion on anything. And what I really love about all of this is you could easily, as a political party, become, I don't know if I can say this, but I'm going to say it because that's what I do. It's bold politics. You could become some sort of weird cult that just leaflets and door knocks, and that's all you do, and it's just about winning elections. But I think it's always important to reconnect with why are we winning elections? Why are we doing all of that work? And it's because we need in this country a politics of care. And actually, door knocking and leafleting, in and of itself, is a politics of care. That's turning up in the community, not just at election time, but all year round, to be there, to be representatives of the community, who even when someone disagrees with you, you're saying, you know what, that's fine, we can disagree, but I'm just here as a volunteer, connecting, maybe not say connecting, that sounds weird if you say it to someone, but I'm here just listening to you, and just here to find out about things. And it's that politics of care that I think needs to run throughout everything we do. Whether it's around special needs education and the fact that we have young people who are being given, or being not given, more importantly, the support they need. Whether it's about unpaid carers, the amount of people who are looking after people in their family. There are children aged between 5 to 18 years old. I met a group just last week in London. I know London's a place I'm not allowed to mention in Sheffield, but it does exist. I'm from Manchester, it's okay, I'm a northerner. But in London, quite seriously, I was hearing from someone who runs a centre for young unpaid carers, and they were talking to me about 5-year-olds who have to get up several times in the night to look after their older parents. And I know that's not just in London. In fact, it is probably more prevalent in places like Sheffield. And so to make sure that we're looking out for both young unpaid carers, but also anyone who's looking after a relative. It's so unhidden, people who do vital and important work. And the way our whole economy is structured means, if we even move away from caring, but babysitting, if you marry your babysitter, then the economy has lost a job. None of this makes sense until we start to go, the politics of care and the economy of care needs to run through everything we do. Sure, if we get economic growth, great. But what kind of economic growth are we looking for? Does the City of London, the financial markets, need more money? Do property developers need more money to destroy green spaces and nature, to go to war with bats and newts, to build more housing that's unaffordable, that no one will actually ever live in? Or could we actually go, let's build housing which is for people. Let's build council housing. Let's build actual affordable housing. Let's make sure we're centering people and putting the politics of care at the heart of everything we do. Let's look at education. Let's look at the health service. Let's make sure whether it's someone who badly needs an emergency appointment at A&E, or someone who's facing the crisis of mental health, that we actually treat mental health the same way that we treat physical health. If someone has broken an arm or a leg, very often that gets taken seriously, as it should do. But how seriously is it taken when a young person, or not even a young person, when an older person says that they're struggling with something, or they need to chat? How can a waiting list be so long? And how have we allowed a situation to happen where funding has got so bad that people need to wait that long? So, finally, how does this link in to what's happening between now and May the 7th? We know in the council chamber we need the right people to make the right decisions. And it really is as easy and simple as that. This isn't about agreeing with every single decision they make. In fact, I often stole it from Zoran Mamdani. I'll credit my sources. That if you agree with me on 7 out of 10 things, I heard a heckle then for Zoran. Hopefully it was a nice heckle. That if you agree with me on 7 out of 10 things, that's great, vote for me, or vote for the Green Party. If you agree with me on 10 out of 10 things, go see a psychiatrist, because I was about to say not even my boyfriend agrees with me on everything. He probably agrees with me about 4 out of 10 things, but that's relationships, right? I'm joking, we agree on most things politically. But actually, it's not about agreeing on every single thing. It's just, again, about a politics of care. When you elect people, do you trust them to go into the council chamber and speak up on your behalf? Do you trust them that their vested interests are the people who elected them and represented them, rather than some vested interest or some cushy job that will happen after they've left cabinet? And what you get in the Green Party are people you can trust. People who haven't made politics their entire life, but teachers, cleaners, nurses, doctors, whoever it may be, from all walks of life, all jobs, and indeed unemployed people. Because unemployed people are people too. People with long-term health conditions are people too. People with disabilities are people too. And in our movement of the 99%, everyone is included. And by the way, the 1% are included if you're a patriotic millionaire and you're saying taxes more. So it's not about excluding people, it's about bringing people together. And it's this bringing of people together. It's this bringing of people together with a bold politics and a politics of care. A politics that tells the truth authentically and genuinely, that isn't afraid to call out injustice, but does it with compassion and does it with connection and brings people together. Friends together. That's how we can change Sheffield, it's how we can change Yorkshire, and it's how we'll change our country. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Zach. Can we get some woos? So without further ado, let's bring on Zack Polanski. So, our first question is by a member called Jane, and they have asked, now that Labour has turned its back on organised labour, I like what you did there. What opportunities does this present for the Greens, and how do we see future engagement with trade unions? Before you ask that question, if I could get the next person for the roving mic, if you're called Sam and you are asking about free bus travel, please put your arm up in the air. I see a man on the top left, as in top right, but my left. While Teresa's getting over there, Zack?
Yeah, thank you. I'm not doing that politician thing of avoiding the question, but just while I remember in this moment, can I say a huge thank you not just to Kim and Chris on the sound, but to everyone who's been involved in organising, stewarding, security, everyone who's involved with this evening. Please give them a huge round of applause. And now I'll answer about trade unions. That wasn't a sneaky operation to avoid talking about trade unions, because trade unions are hugely important, both to the Green Party nationally, but also, as I was talking about before, Sheffield's history with trade unions. And we've already seen some movement just in the last couple of weeks. I don't know if many of you saw the poll that came out of the NEU, National Education Union. You saw amongst educators or people who work in education, Labour plummeted their support. We're not talking about a little bit, we're talking about in double figures, plummeted down. That would be good in and of itself, but not enough. But the Green Party massively on the rise. And it doesn't surprise me, because educators often work with young people. They're also interested in information, in ideas, and in facts. So I can already see that heading in that direction, and I'm really hoping, I'm not here to plug a podcast, but while I'm here, I'm plugging a podcast. I've got a podcast called Bold Politics, which any of you can find on any streaming platform. I'm hoping to have Daniel Kabady, who's the chair of the NEU, on very soon. But more widely than the NEU, I think so many of the trade unions, naturally the Green Party should be the home of workers. And actually in my first week in September of being elected leader of the Green Party, I went to the TUC, Trade Union Congress, to speak. And I think it was when I first realized that things were really changing for me, but more importantly the Green Party, very rapidly. Because so this is, I don't know if I've ever admitted this in public, but there's always someone with me, like a member of staff, who goes with me anywhere. So basically, if someone hands me something, as a new member did, and welcome to the person who did, rather than me carrying it around all day, I hand it to the person, and then they give it to me at the end. There he is. Thanks, Ruben. Rufus, sorry. And these people are called Zackarones. That's better, I've never said that out loud before. And the party said, do you need a Zackarone with you when you go to the TUC? And I said, no, it'll be fine, I'm just chatting to some workers. And I got there, and suddenly all the broadcasters came flying at me, plus leaders of trade unions and workers all at once, because they recognized that there was a unique moment, not just for the Green Party, but for the left, and actually a moment in national discourse to say this is a time to challenge the corporations who are destroying our environment, they're destroying our democracy, and they're destroying our communities. But it's not just a negative thing, there's also a positive thing in here too. Here's a party which has a moment to say workers' rights need to be at the front and center of this. Yes, in terms of making sure that we have a decent minimum or living wage, but also that people are in trade unions, that they're treated with dignity and care, that they have the right to organize, not just to roll back on the anti-trade union laws of the Labour government, but to go even further back, much, much further back, because organizing is a fundamental principle of our democracy. And without going away from the question too long, I should give you an opportunity, Kim, to throw something at me if I talk too long, but yeah, okay. Maybe a microphone. I'm going to delve for 1 second and I'll come back. It's not just about unions, though. We also see this with protest. When this government don't like something, they ban it. They just take it out. And it's really struck me around the hunger strikers that we know that most of the time when people go to court for things like Palestine Action, when there is a jury, they are ruled not guilty. Not just on Palestine Action, but also on climate crisis, Extinction Rebellion, Just Stop Oil. Because when a jury hear the basic facts, that someone is standing in a road or handcuffing themselves to something because we have an existential crisis and politicians from most parties are refusing to do anything about it. When a jury hear enough of that information for long enough, most of the time they go, well, I still don't love you doing it because you're inconveniencing people, but I get why you're doing it, and they get let off. So the absolute cynicism of arresting people for holding up cardboard signs saying, I support Palestine action, I oppose genocide, putting them in jail, putting them on remand on detention without trial until January next year, so that will have been 20 months, when I think the legal limit is between 6 and 8 months. Can't remember the exact figure, but it's a lot longer than the legal limit. And in that time, proposing to abolish jury trials. This is not a conspiracy theory. It's just quite obvious what this government looked to do. I was going to say they're embarrassed and they're ashamed. They're not, but they should be embarrassed and they should be ashamed, because when you look at where public polling is on the genocide, obviously the genocide is bad as an absolute, but even when you look at where public sentiment, unsurprisingly, people are not okay with seeing, I was going to say children and babies murdered, but obviously anyone being murdered in a genocide is not okay. And so this government know that they have been caught out, that the public are in a completely different place to where this Labour government are. So what have they done to the dissenters? They have banned protesting because they're trying to cover up the embarrassment. And so to get back to the trade unions, and I'll stop speaking, I promise, the anti-strike laws are looking to do the same thing. We know that they're trying to pit worker against worker. We saw this with the junior doctors, that we know when people strike like teachers or nurses, they're much more likely to get public support. It's really important we also support the junior doctors. These are people who have trained for a long time, who want to look after our health when we might need it, and whose wages have not risen in line with inflation. They've taken pay cut after pay cut. Obviously, it's not just the junior doctors, but my point is that it's not like there's a group of people who are us the people and a group of people who are the workers. We are the workers. And so when they start trying to separate us from each other, that's exactly what they're trying to do, divide and rule. And so when people go on strike, when people organize who don't want to strike but are organizing because they are demanding fair pay, they are demanding fair conditions, there is only one authentic response, and the response is solidarity.
Thank you very much, Zach. That was fantastic. I mean, went round the houses.
I didn't hear you.
I mean, being close to conservative, especially in terms of strike laws, very, very sad, but it's the state of the world that we're in. So, Sam, up there. But beforehand, I've got a name called Gemma and mentioned something about Farage. Now, I don't know if they're here because they asked this question a while ago. If they are, I see another hand. Everyone's in the gallery. Fantastic. So yeah, if we could, Teresa, if you get to Gemma, that'd be fantastic. And then Sam, yes, if you could go forward. Thank you.
Hi, Zach. I'm up here. Hello. The policy you announced today about free bus fares for under 22s is great, but I was just wondering what your views were on an entirely fare-free public transport system similar to what Zoran is proposing.
Yep. There's always, in politics, whether it's at a local level or a national level, stages that you need to take people to, and a place that you want to get to, and then where the incremental changes. And I'm going to come straight back to your question, but I'm feeling an example of this a lot with the policy, or the idea, not the policy, of open borders, where I've said over and over again to the public that yes, we would support open borders in an ideal world. We're not there yet, so right now let's try and manage migration system as a very beginning, and then we'll see where we get to. And the buses today is a very similar thing. Because I know this is not what you're asking, but I saw a few people online when the BBC announced it said, why not just free bus travel for all? Or why are we just taking a particular group? Surely that's divide and rule. And the point is that to get people to places, you have to begin with a group sometimes to go, let's work this out, let's see how this goes. And the reason we particularly picked younger people is there's lots of evidence to show the biggest thing that will stop you getting a bus is when you're younger if you never got the bus, because it's just not a habitual thing you do. Whereas if people get used to getting the bus and see it as an accessible, affordable, it's very affordable in this case, free, but even if it was just cheaper, then that encourages more bus use. And again in cities, this seems obvious, but I'm going to say it because it's not obvious always to the media, if you raise bus prices, passengers go down. If you lower bus prices, passengers go up. So price is not the only thing or the only obstacle that needs to be overcome to get more bus ridership. They also need to be going to the right places. You need to not be waiting a few hours if you're lucky, or a few days for a bus. They should also be comfortable. One of my favorite policies ever, bee-friendly bus stops. I was about to say, I don't know why someone needs a bee-friendly bus stop, but the bee needs a bee-friendly bus stop. But that just makes a lot of sense, to cover the top of bus stops with places where bees can pollinate, and to have kind of mini allotments on bus stops. And so by doing all of these things, you're making a more pleasant environment for people to get the bus. In terms of free public transport for all, it's absolutely a principle that totally makes sense, and a conversation that the country should have. At the moment, though, it's also true that even just saying we're going to make free bus travel for under 22s was something that the government U-turned on. So that's where public discourse is at right now. So I think always you're looking what's the next win you can get, and then the next win to then create the radical transformation. And I think this links into a question that someone asked me earlier, which was about, is the plan to get to a green government? Because sometimes it can just feel like we're trying to win a few seats, or we're just trying to get in opposition. So I want to be very clear that the goal and the mission eventually is to have a green government. That's very obvious and very simple. No, not simple. Yeah, it's simple. It's not easy. I'm also aware of a politician that many of you will remember called Joe Swinson. And it's officially a verb, Joe Swinsoning it, which is where Joe Swinson, as the Liberal Democrat leader, said she was going to be the next Prime Minister and then promptly lost her own seat. And that's what happens if you say things that don't feel tangible or achievable in the short term. It just feels unrealistic, and you lose the public. So it's always this tightrope between pushing what's known as the Overton window, which is just the window of acceptable discourse. It's our job to push it. It's not our job to stay in it as the Green Party. We should always be at the edge of it, where what we're saying is being ridiculed, is being said that it's impossible, but we can win the argument. If we go too far out of the Overton window, we're not pushing it, we're just kind of in another house with another window. Strange metaphors here, and no one's listening to us. So I see it as our job to be in the same house as where everyone else, but we're really pushing that window as fast as possible, because boy, do things need to change quick. Yeah.
Okay, so Teresa, you're over to Gemma already. Fantastic. So if the next person could speak, it will also be Hilary Brown. Is her hand up? There she is. Agnes, if you could make your way over. So yes, so Gemma, go ahead.
Very linked to the points you've just made. For a long time, Nigel Farage has been pushing the Overton window to the right, and the narrative that goes with that. And I'm wondering, so far since you've been leader, how have you been able to engage with other politicians, with the media? Do you feel there's progress being made on starting to push the window the other way? And what more can we do to take charge of the narrative? Because it's clearly affecting the direction that the current government's in until such time that the Greens are in it.
There is no complacency, and I think we need to be proud of ourselves. I think we are making massive progress. Now, that does not mean that, I was going to say everything's okay, or indeed sometimes anything is okay. There is still so much that needs to be changed. But even the way this government is speaking is already changing. And don't think for a second that's because they're suddenly finding a conscience. That's because some Labour MPs are absolutely terrified for their seats. Now, I'm trying to think how to be, I'm going to be discreet, but not too discreet. A Labour MP said to me recently, journalists ask me all the time, what seat am I going to run in as an MP? And the truth is, I don't know, but it will be a London seat, just because I'm already elected to the London Assembly, so it makes coherent sense that I already represent everybody in London, so I'd just be taking a step as a parliamentarian. And one of the seats I live close to is Walthamstow, which is Stella Creasy's seat. And this left-wing Labour MP said to me, ever since you've become leader, Stella Creasy has pushed herself and her politics more and more to the left, including the amendments she's signing, including the things she's doing and the protests she's going. So he said to me, could you name some other Labour MPs around London every so often so we could just push them all to the left slowly over time? And I thought it's quite an interesting strategy to keep making people worried. Now, I'm partly joking when I say this, but actually I'm being completely serious too. That we know that if politicians have not had a threat to their seat, or they've not been worried about their seat because they've been in a so-called Labour seat, then they've never had to worry about representing the left. Now, that's not some conspiracy theory. Keir Starmer said it. The door is open. You can leave. And he shouldn't have been surprised that many, many people have left and they're not planning to come back. And so the question is then, what do we do with that momentum and how do we change it? This isn't just theory. When you look at the budget, the fact that the child benefit cap was finally lifted, and the kind of cynicism of a Labour government who constantly say, we are taking hundreds of thousands of children out of poverty, this is the right thing to do because it's not right that children are in poverty. They're completely correct. But what happened in the 18 months, where 18 months ago, it wasn't okay for children to be in poverty? I'll tell you what happened. Green Party membership tripled, our polling tripled, and we're becoming a more and more credible, serious electoral threat in seats all around the country. So to come back to the point I was making about not planning for a Green government anytime soon, as in this Parliament, what we absolutely need to do is make sure that we are winning Green MPs all across the country, including in Sheffield, and making sure that we're winning those MPs so in the next Parliament, we can be looking to either be holding the balance of power, or if we're solely in opposition, to holding the feet to the fire and pushing the Overton window to keep growing those Green MPs to get to that next government. And we do that by being really clear about our values, by not prevaricating or obfuscating, not trying to be all things to all people, but actually being really clear about the things that we stand for. Now, the flip side of that is that doesn't mean, not that I would dare do this for a second, me telling you what to do, because that's not how the Green Party works. For people who don't know in this room, we're a fully democratic, member-led organisation that is one member, one vote. So every year we have 1 or 2 conferences, both in person and remotely, where any single member can come up with policy, as long as they get together with some other members, put it down, put it into the system, it goes to the conference, and then it's literally a hand vote. It's quite, romantic's the wrong word, it's definitely not romantic. I can't find the word. Beautiful in its kind of simplicity, that there's a debate in a room like this, and people raise their hands to vote for something or raise their hands to vote against something. If it's voted against, it can't come back, I think, for 6 months to a year. And if it's voted for, that then is Green Party policy. What's really exciting is the rate that we're growing at means that Green Party policy is not just going in a file somewhere, that's going to be on the media, it's for things that we're talking about, and again, it is changing the national discourse. So just to end at your question, sorry, I'm used to LBC where they interrupt me after 10 seconds, so give me a...
You're saying everything I would want to say.
Okay,
so
great.
But, we do have more questions
Yeah,
to
okay,
get
so
to.
I promise to be brief on the next questions. But in terms of shifting the Overton window, I think we absolutely are shifting it. I think even on issues like immigration, which have some of the kind of bleakest discourse out there, the fact that the narrative is starting to change a little bit in terms of even, if people weren't in hotels or asylum barracks, where would you put them instead? Just even asking the question is really helpful. I love the amount of media who say to me, oh, does the Green Party not care about the environment now? Are you just the Social Justice Party? Because then I get 5 minutes to talk about the environment, to talk about the climate crisis. And so just playing the media at their own game, making sure we're claiming the narrative, we're pushing the Overton window. To finish where I started, I'm not complacent at all. There's so much to do. And there's so many places where our political discourse is so miles away from where the truth is or actual information. But I'm finding hope in the fact that things are changing and the country is finally starting to have the conversations that we need to have. And also, watch out for the party political broadcast on Thursday night. It's a good one.
Thank you, Zack. But I must say, are you sure you know what the actual debt amount is of this country? Because if you don't know that, we've got a big problem.
Now, but I have to say, Rory Stewart then got it wrong on the next episode, which I think is beautiful irony.
Okay, thank you. So it'll be Hillary next, and then...
It's £100 billion, by the way, on the interest. But it's not. It's a more complicated conversation.
And then after Hillary, I've got a question that came in a while ago, so it may not come in from someone who's in this room, but their name is James M. That's all I've got, the M. And they asked in relation to their mother down in the southeast. If they know who they are, wave their hand up. Nope, that's cool. I will ask that question myself. So, Hillary.
Hi. I'm a member of the organising committee of Sheffield Palestine Coalition Against Israeli Apartheid. The Palestine Solidarity Movement in the UK faces increasing attacks, both on the right to protest and the right to speak out. And it affects organisations and individuals and has a chilling effect, resulting in self-censorship, silencing and avoidance of difficult issues. How can you ensure that the Green Party, its branches and its individual members are not silenced by these attacks? Thank you.
Hillary. I'm going to give a short first answer and then a longer second answer. The first answer, before I take responsibility, is it's definitely not solely my responsibility for the exact reason I just said. We're a member-led party, so people in their local branches across the country in England and Wales going to their branches and looking at both how to get people elected and also around the campaigning work, what more can we do to lift the voices of the Palestinians? That's my first answer. My second answer, taking more responsibility as a national leader, I was really honoured to speak at the annual conference for the boycott, divestment, sanctions in London, where they've had that conference for years. And I was on the panel with many Palestinian speakers talking about what's happening and indeed lifting up the work at places like Bristol, which now have areas like Stokes Croft, which have declared themselves apartheid-free zone. So they've stopped stocking goods that come from the settlements or illegal areas. In terms of the attacks, so I think there's two answers here. One, it's probably not escaped people's attention in this room, but there's only been 5 Jewish British leaders, or 5 Jewish people who have led British political parties in history, and I'm one of those 5. Now, that doesn't mean as a Jewish politician you have any extra responsibility to speak out against Israel, but it does mean, as I've chosen to, that I think it does give it a particular nuance where I'm very, very clear that you can absolutely stand and must stand with the Palestinians and not be anti-Semitic. And for those of you who might not have seen in the last 24 hours, I can't quite believe I'm saying this, but the government have a anti-Semitism czar, Lord John Mann, who, when Reform UK made an anti-Semitic cartoon of me, had absolutely nothing to say about it. When the Daily Mail put a pretty anti-Semitic caricature of me, had nothing to say about it. But yesterday, the anti-Semitism czar for the Labour government decided to attack the only Jewish National Party leader in ways that claimed that I was in some way anti-Semitic or that I didn't claim what anti-Semitism was. The bit of the story I'm missing here is that John Mann is not Jewish. So it shows the kind of rabbit hole. Someone said to me, I've missed the rabbi hole joke that I could make there, but anyway, it's a serious issue. The rabbit hole of how weaponized anti-Semitism has become. Now, as a Jewish person, I want to be crystal clear. Anti-Semitism exists. It's really serious. I have experienced it. I've experienced it almost every day, in fact, online, where people, I say something and they go, he would say that, he's Jewish. That's clear anti-Semitism. There's no kind of blurred line there. But the cynical use of anti-Semitism to try to silence voices who are standing in solidarity with Palestine has been deeply corrosive to our political discourse, and indeed has been used to try and silence people. We all have a responsibility to consider the words and phrases we use, to be sensitive, and to consider, can we always phrase something or say something in a way that doesn't aim to be offensive, but aims to tell the truth. At the same time, I think the most offensive thing possible is a genocide and a government that arms a genocide. So at the same time as always encouraging us to consider our language, how can we always be more inclusive? Because sometimes I think derogatory language or inflammatory language, the point is missed anyway. But actually, if we can find ways to communicate truth and stand in solidarity with the Palestinian people. I think that's the only way we can ever take on the people who choose to scare us, is to stand in our truth, to stand authentically, and always tell the truth, even when, or especially when, under attack.
All right, thank you very much. So, next question will be James M. The question after that will be Dylan. If Dylan could raise their hand, that would be super. Sorry, wrong Dylan. As far as I'm aware, it's Dylan who was on refreshments and is not here anymore. Anyway, Dylan West, sorry. So, in terms of James's question, his question to you is, come on, my eyes. My mum, who lives on the south coast and has always voted Tory and then voted for Brexit, which she says she now regrets, in the last election she voted Reform. Speaking to her recently, she was undecided if to vote Reform again or back to the Tories. I asked her if she would consider voting for the Green Party. She replied, it would be a wasted vote. What would you say to her in your reply to this?
Say here. So I was in Darlington the other day in the northeast, and a woman came up to me after the Q&A, and she said that her husband had been a Conservative member pretty much all of his life, had joined the Reform Party, and was now a Green Party member. My brain was like, what? Thankfully, my mouth didn't do that. I just said, oh, can you tell me a bit more about that? And she said that he'd been watching me on TV and radio and other Green politicians and on podcasts. And I just said, you know what? There's not a single thing they say that I can actually disagree with. So I think part of it is just as cutting through, as representing a group of people who often, I was going to say, feel like they've not been seen. They don't feel like it. They haven't been seen. They've not been represented. They have been left behind. Their communities have been destroyed for all the reasons I've talked about tonight. So I think part one is making sure that our message is being heard, even by unexpected people. I'm sure many of you who have door knocked have had the experience where someone goes, it's between you and the Reform Party, and you're a bit like, I can't quite work out where you're going. But it's part one is an anti-establishment vote, so they just don't want Labour or the Tories. But part two is that they just want people who are going to tell the truth and challenge power and wealth. Now we know Reform are never going to do that. But they've done a pretty good job of storytelling that are always presenting themselves as challenging the status quo. We know that one of the biggest things that a Reform-curious voter can't stand is the fact that Reform have taken so much money from corporate donors. In fact, from 2019 to 2024, £2.3 million, that's 95% of Reform's donations, were from fossil fuel companies, climate-denying companies, oil and gas companies, all of the kind of bad gang together. And every time I bring that up with a Reform politician on a TV studio, they don't know what to do with it. They shut it down as quickly as possible. In fact, George Carlin, the comedian, had a famous joke about politicians, like racing car drivers, should have to wear shirts that have their sponsors just listed across them. I'd just have Green Party members there, but most politicians would have, like, we've got Wes Streeting, the health secretary, the amount of private healthcare donors. He'd need several T-shirts, and it would cover the back as well. And so I think for people who are curious about voting Reform, they need to know that. The second thing is that people who are thinking about voting Reform are not our enemy. There's a big difference between a Reform MP or the leader of Reform and people who are curious about Reform. In fact, they're the exact people we need to care about. They're people who have been abandoned by the system, who haven't had a politics that's ever represented them. So as much as I joke about going, what, when someone says they're thinking about voting Reform, I do get it. I get it quite deeply, and I think we all need to feel the compassion towards people who have been pushed to a place where you would see Nigel Farage say anything and think that might be a solution to things. We really, really need to make sure that in communities we're reaching out to people. And I say communities specifically because I don't think social media is the place we're going to win these people. I think that's just more divisive. But actually, door to door, in the communities, having those conversations is how you bring people around. And Martin Ali, our brilliant co-deputy leader, in fact, he lived in Sheffield, born in Sheffield, lived in Sheffield, Yorkshireman.
Born in Sheffield.
Born in Sheffield, there we go. and now in Gipton and Hare Hills near Leeds. He tells a powerful story about knocking on someone's door and them calling him the P word. And he would have been completely in his rights, I think, to walk away from that conversation. But Muffins, well, he's a Yorkshireman, he's made of something different. So he carried on the conversation. And by the end of the conversation, they were voting Green. Now, I'm not gaslighting anyone, particularly anyone of colour, to say it's your job to talk to someone being racist to you and turn them around. But I think what Mothin's story does is tell the power of being able to stand there without judgment, just listen and have that conversation. Finally, in terms of wasted vote, I mean, I say this to anyone who ever says something's a wasted vote. It's so obvious to me, which is never a good sentence to start with something. That's why I paused, but it is obvious to me, so I'm just going to be honest. It's so obvious to me that the only wasted vote is going into a ballot box and voting for something you don't believe in, for voting for something that you think is the least of the worst options, for voting for something that supports genocide, child poverty, that U-turns on every single thing possible, that lies to you, that offers nothing but wasted hopes and dreams, that offers nothing but tax subsidies to multimillionaires and billionaires. That's a wasted vote. A wasted vote is voting for the Tories, 14 years of austerity that clearly didn't give a crap about anyone, that's just continued and has now claimed to have some sort of regeneration, like Kemi Badenoch's Doctor Who, but a very cheap remake. Actually, the best vote you can ever make is to say, actually, if I vote this and I convince my friends, my neighbours, I was going to say strangers, I can't say strangers in London, no one would ever talk to strangers, but I'm in Sheffield, I can say talk to strangers, talk to everyone that you know. And that's not then a wasted vote, because it's very obvious that if enough people vote for a party, they win. So again, we need to overcome this lack of imagination. We need to overcome this idea of barrier. And by the way, the best way to do that at a national level is to win at the local level, and that's exactly what you're doing in Sheffield. Now, I want to qualify that statement. Sometimes I hear politicians from other parties say, we've got to win at council level because we need to win an MP. That's outrageous. There's nothing more important than a local councillor, and I really mean that. Most people's first experience of politics, actually second experience, most people's first experience of politics is Prime Minister's questions, seeing people scream at each other, and unsurprisingly going, that's not for me. Their second experience, hopefully, is their local councillor. It's the person that they reach out to when they've got a problem with mould or damp on their wall, when they're worried about the library shutting down, or they want to protect a tree, or they want to make sure that a street's closed down so you can have a child-friendly play street. All of those experiences, to have a local councillor who really cares, who turns up, and even when they disagree, treats you like an adult that will talk to you with sensitivity and care, that's the way to turn these things around, and that can never be a wasted vote.
Thank you. So, I was actually incorrect earlier, and so the next speaker is Dylan Lane, just down there. And then after that, again, this is a question that came in from a while ago. It's someone under the name of Sam, and they're talking about patients being discharged from hospital. Are they in this room right now, and can they give a wave? I see someone up there, Teresa. Excellent, perfect. Right, so, without...
Yay, Dylan, go Dylan. That'd be a good one, no pressure.
As Green Party leader, how will you make it easier for working class young people to get involved in politics as a career and generally?
The first thing I'd say is when a young person asks a question like that, and it's a good question, the room should give them a round of applause. It's always amazing to see young people in particular at events and getting involved with asking questions. The second thing I'd say is I hear politicians all the time say, I'm so inspired by young people, inspired by the next generation. My argument is always stop being inspired by young people and help them get into positions where they're able to get elected or to hold the levers of power or to make decisions for themselves. We need to empower young people by giving them the resources, the confidence, the training to make sure that they can make decisions for themselves. I know plenty of people in this room will know about the Young Greens, but if you don't, spare me a minute. If you look at like the Labour Party manifesto, well, let me do this another way around. If you want to see the Labour manifesto in about 10 years' time, just look at the Green Party manifesto now, because they usually get round to it. This used to work as a statement. It probably doesn't work anymore now. They're heading in the other direction. But it used to be that the Labour Party would just copy Green Party ideas. But if you want to see the Green Party manifesto at the next election, just go to a Young Green meeting, because they're always talking about those ideas, like the one that we had earlier around free public transport. What are those big ideas that we're not just pushing the Overton window a little bit, they're pushing me and the whole party to push the Overton window as far as we can with good, credible, exciting ideas. And I think part of that is knowing that this planet is what we're handing to them, but the inequalities that we're facing right now are going to hit younger people much, much harder than my generation or the generation before. Whether it's getting on the housing ladder, I mean, that's even a dream to most young people. Even being able to rent at an affordable rent, which is exactly why we need rent controls and to stop the scourge of unscrupulous landlords. Whether it's about making sure that we have free education, so that education is a right and not a privilege. Whether it's about investment in mental health, not just from eco-anxiety around the increasing climate crisis, but far too often if someone breaks an arm or a leg, a physical ailment or a disability, a long-term health condition, that's taken seriously, maybe, as it should be, but very rarely is the same severity given to mental health, particularly for younger people. There's all that pull yourself up by the bootstraps and all that nonsense. And so in terms of what we can do for young people, particularly young working class people, is make sure that we're tackling this inequality. And we can't do that sustainably until we recognize the inequalities I was talking about earlier. When so much money and power is being hoarded, that system cannot maintain itself. In fact, that system is close to societal collapse. And so that's why we urgently need change. And the only thing that is certain is that the status quo will not maintain. So the question we all need to ask ourselves in this room, particularly I'm afraid for the younger people, but those of us who are less young have an extra responsibility to do this for the younger people, is the status quo won't maintain. So is it going to tip towards the far right, towards fascism, towards what we see going on in the USA? Or, if we also look at the USA, what Zoran Mamdani has done in New York, which is to show absolute solidarity to minority groups, to never budge an inch on human rights and on making sure we defend our freedoms, and always bringing the conversation back to inequality. Because ultimately, far too many people, well, not far too many people, a small, tiny group of people, actually, a small, tiny group of people have taken our power, our wealth, and they're trying to take our democracy. And for the young people, it's time to take it back. Or in full-time education, join the Young Greens.
I'm 31, just 1 year over, sadly. I'm young at heart for another 20 years, hopefully. So the next question will be Sam up there, and then the question after that will be Agnes for that. Okay, and then I will go on to the next one after that. We've only got another about 10 minutes, so you might have to do a bit more quick fire if you can. Points will be deducted at the end of this. So Sam.
Thank you. I'd just like to ask how you think improvements could be made for people being discharged back into the community from treatment in hospital. Say, help around care packages, for example.
Thank you very much. You finished?
Yes.
Oh, great. I was in Cardiff at the weekend, and just as I was about to go on stage, I met a woman who had been working for the NHS since 1983. She'd been in the Labour Party about 20, 30 years, and she'd just joined the Green Party. And this exact issue was the issue that kind of pushed her over the edge. Pushed her over the edge sounds bad. Had made her leap for a better future. Because she'd ultimately said that she was seeing people discharged over and over again who were not ready to be discharged. She was seeing people on hospital trolleys in waiting rooms who weren't being given proper beds. And of course, the answers for this are very obvious, is that that's managed decline over a long period of time. And that's devastating any time in any kind of sequence. But during the pandemic, we saw the fatal consequences that can happen when we don't plan properly, when we don't make sure that we're at capacity and resourced, and when decisions are made not based on science or by medical health professionals, but by Boris Johnson. Or we could replace Boris Johnson with any politician who is ultimately looking at profit rather than people. So in terms of what we can do about it, I think the suggestion you make is entirely clear. I think also there's lots of other suggestions around what does a more holistic approach to this look like. We know that budgets and councils are really struggling because some councils, 80% of the budget is on adult social care. The fact that this has been pushed on to local councils, then local councils have had their budget stripped away, so they can't even run most basic services, and they're having to juggle adult social care, also then puts more burden on an already incredibly burdened National Health Service. And if this wasn't grim and depressing enough, and I'll try and find some hope in a moment, just telling the truth first, it's all being done for a very deliberate reason, which is for governments to point at the National Health Service and go, oh no, it's still going to be free at the point of use, but we're going to outsource this bit to a private company, or we're going to give Palantir this kind of data because this clearly isn't efficient and isn't working. And all they're doing is taking our public money from the wealth creators. If we talk about wealth creators, let's talk about teachers, nurses, doctors, the people who are actually keeping the country moving and working. And instead, they're going to siphon it off to organizations that have over and over again been shown to be lacking in some of the most basic humanitarian efforts when we talk about G4S or any of the kind of private companies that are being given these sorts of contracts. I think the hope is that the public aren't going to stand for it. I think the reason why the government are more brazen on some things than others, and even Nigel Farage kind of hints around needing a insurance system for private healthcare or for healthcare. He won't quite get out there and say it. And that is the reason, because we're incredibly proud of our National Health Service in this country. And I think people recognize that it's underfunded, that it could be better, but actually it's better than pretty much any of the alternatives. And when so much of the rest of the world looks to us for the best kind of healthcare treatment, or has done in the past, it seems absolutely outrageous that these gangsters are looking to dismantle it. So absolutely, I don't know if you said you worked in healthcare or not. On behalf of a relative, thank you. Well, thank you to your relative for the question, but also that's a moment to say to everyone who does work in healthcare, thank you for everything that you do. I recognize how difficult it must be working in a situation that is so underfunded, and thank you for everything you do to keep me, to keep our family, our relatives, and our loved ones healthy. Thank you.
Okay, so after Agnes,
I'll get
I
quicker.
did say quick fire, and I'm too nice in letting you keep going. And I
promise 45 seconds on the next one. You can do a countdown clock.
Okay, so after Agnes, is Olivia Bannerman in at all? I'm seeing a wave over there. So Agnes, you may need to walk while talking.
That's okay. I'll be asking my question while I'm walking that way. Hi, Zack. My name is Agnes. I'm the EDI coordinator for Sheffield Green Party. And I want to ask you a question about trans rights. And quite specifically, I want to ask you a question about how do we, ordinary members, can challenge the narrative that is being funded through, millionaires and public figures that is minimizing the rights and existence of our trans siblings. How can we challenge that, not only externally, but also internally within Green Party?
I said 45 seconds.
Maybe 2 minutes. You've got, a minute and a half.
First of all, your question is framed perfectly. We know in America that much of the gender critical movement was funded by fossil fuel giants in order to split the left and create conversations that became culture wars. We also know, as I talked about Zoran, that it's important that we show absolute solidarity to all minority groups, including trans people, and at the same time point out the fact that inequality that runs right throughout our society is affecting trans people, and it's affecting everyone. So let's get on with tackling inequality. In terms of how do we challenge things, I think it's the same as the question, it's a different context obviously, but the same as the question about Palestine, where people are tried to be silenced. I think you have to stand on your truth. I think we have to be really clear that trans rights are human rights, trans men are men, trans women are women, non-binary identities are perfectly valid and exist. And ultimately, we need to make sure that we don't allow trans rights to become in opposition to women's rights. We know that violence against women and girls is an incredibly serious issue that faces a complete lack of funding, which we've talked about several times tonight. We also know that if a woman faces domestic abuse or violence, it's much more likely to come from someone inside the home or, sadly, their own partner. Those are not problems caused by trans people, but far too often a billionaire media has distracted and pointed down or tried to punch down at trans people rather than point to the real problem. So externally, I think it's about telling the truth. Internally, I think it's about making sure that we're always organized all together. They're not just on the rights of trans people, but for people of color, for migrants, for refugees, for working class people, that we always make sure that the people with the lived experience and the person who is the most marginalized in any group shares space at the center of that, so we're able to hear their voice. This isn't about pitting groups against each other. It's about saying there's room for everyone here, and ultimately anyone who's trying to divide us, let's look at what the distraction is. And the distraction is almost always inequality. So again, huge solidarity to trans people. Thank you.
And Olivia with our last question.
Hello, Zach. I forgot I had asked a question, but I remember it now. So, we live in very dark times. You give me hope. What gives you hope?
That's really kind of you. It's actually a really nice question to end on, and I don't know if you planted it for, not planted, that's a terrible phrase to use. And Olivia, I wasn't calling you a plant either. I've offended everyone in this whole situation. I'm moved and I'm touched by the fact I can't get a train, or even I was riding my bike the other day, and when I stopped at a red light, someone from Canada ran over to get a selfie with me before the lights changed. And I won't lie, that's gorgeous, it's very lovely. And it's not enough, it's not nearly enough. No one's coming to save us, and I'm including myself in that. I can't save people, no politician can save people. We can save ourselves, and that's what gives me hope. That actually this is not about some kind of top-down mobilizing or campaigning, it's actually about organizing. It's people coming together in their communities. Sure, be inspired. I get inspired by people I hear all the time, pretty much every day. Being inspired is great, and I'm absolutely there for that, and that's a huge part of my role. But it's what do we do with that inspiration? And what I think we ideally do is, again, we talk to our friends, our neighbors, people in our workplaces, and we go, we are living in dark times, but it doesn't have to be dark times. In the same way that it felt maybe a couple of decades ago, certainly when I was younger, that we were progressing, certainly on social justice. It felt like things were getting better. That was never inevitable. We just talked about trans rights. We know that's rolling back. We even know as a gay man that gay men will be next. Trans rights is the canary in the coal mine. That's why whenever any minority group is under attack, we always need to stand together. But what gives me hope about this is that I know enough people get that, enough people care, and there is more than enough people power in this room, in Sheffield, around the country who want things to be different. And that's not that was an abstract idea of mine a year ago that I imagine most people in this room would share, but we didn't quite know. But since September, things have been building, and in the last month or two, things have really built. We are soaring in the polls like we never have before. Membership has tripled. What we are hearing loud and clear is there is a huge and strong appetite for change. But that change cannot come from the top down. That change comes from courage, that change comes from community, and that change comes from the collective. And we are the collective. We are the people who are going to save ourselves. We're the people who can save the people that we don't yet know. And I'm talking in the language of saving. It's much more in the language of supporting, or I guess on a theme, it's the language of care. It's caring for people that we don't know yet, for no reason other than they're people and that we're humanitarians. It's caring about the fact that if we want more peace, there's nothing naive about talking about diplomacy. If we want a fairer taxation system, there's nothing too idealistic about saying multimillionaires and billionaires should pay a little bit more. I'm going to end on a strange place, but it feels important in this moment. It's community energy. Community energy in and of itself is not going to stop fascism. But far too often, communities feel, in fact, they don't just feel, Politics is being done to them rather than with them. And I think that's why we're getting this big gap between where politicians are and where the public are at. Things like community energy are an amazing example where you can invest in a community and that community can then decide how the energy and the money is spent. Now that's great in itself for community power, great for tackling the climate crisis, and great for good, cheap energy. But actually I think it's a metaphor too. Because I think when we have that literal power, whether it's community power, as in literally renewable power, or the power we have to campaign, that's the power that we can take to take on the far right. And I'm absolutely convinced, more than I ever have, that we are going to take them on, we are going to win, and that's how we're going to make hope normal again. Thank you very much.